What is up, guys? TopTierYugioh here, and today I've got a Shaddoll Artifact Numeron Dogmatika deck profile for you guys, and I'm super excited about this deck because of how unique and innovative it is. I mean, really, this deck is not like anything else this format. It's kind of hard to describe, but basically it's a deck that just says no. Your opponent's going to try to play the game and you're going to stop them with a Zexal or a Winda or an Artifact Scythe, and then you're going to use your Dogmatika Engine to capitalize on that and then go for a game. And it's really just cool, and there's so many interesting plays and interactions that I think you guys are going to enjoy. But let's just go ahead and get into the profile. I'll explain everything as we go, and I'm sure that once you see the deck and try it out, you'll love it just as much as I do. So we're going to kick things off with the Dogmatika Engine, and for that we're playing 3 copies of Ecclesia, 3 copies of Nadir's Servant, 3 copies of Punishment, 1 copy of Maximus, and then 2 copies of Fleur de Lis. So this is a huge Dogmatika engine, and it's necessary in this deck because at the end of the day, this is actually a Dogmatika deck. Your Dogmatika engine is what carries your deck and allows you to win games. But this is very, very different from what you're seeing in a lot of other Dogma decks right now. Like, for example, Dogmatika Synchro Outlich is Synchro Outlich. Dogmatika Invoked is Invoked. Dogmatika Zodiac is a Zodiac deck. And all of these decks, the Dogmatika engine is just a complement to another main engine. It's just the icing on the cake. However, in this deck, the Dogmatika engine is the cake. It's what makes everything else work. And that's why we need to play a lot of Dogmatika engine cards. And so for that, we have the 3 copies of Ecclesia, 3 Servant, 3 Punishment, and Maximus, because all of these get us to our other Dogmatika cards. They get us to other parts of our deck, and again, allow the entire deck to sort of coexist and combine into one awesome, amazing deck. And so we have these 10 Dogmatika Engine cards and then these 2 Dogmatika Utility cards. And now, even though the Dogmatika Engine is very important, I still only like playing 1 copy of Maximus due to how difficult it is to actually use turn 1, because we don't have a play to really put extra deck monsters in the graveyard aside from Nadir's Servant early on. And so opening Maximus is usually dead. However, it is big to search on turns 2, 3, and generally in the mid to late game to keep your engine going. And then also by then you know 100% what you're playing against, and so you don't have to worry whether or not there's going to be stuff in their extra deck that they might want to send anyways, because you're going to know like whether or not they're playing Invoked and stuff like that. And obviously you wouldn't use Maximus in that matchup, but by then you usually know how to use Maximus, and it's almost always safe in this deck. Like, I've never played this deck and then accidentally had my opponent send Intis or a Titanclad of their own or something like that, or a Nova. That's just never happened to me. Mostly because most top decks are not doing that, but also because if you play smart, you can play around that. And that's exactly what this deck does. Now, moving on to the Shaddoll engine, we have 1 copy of Shaddoll Schism, 1 copy of Shaddoll Beast, 1 Shaddoll Dragon, and then 1 Nail Shaddoll Aerial. And so, despite how few Shaddoll cards we actually play in the main deck, I will say that they are a huge presence in how this deck plays, and you'll see what I mean when we look at some test hands later on. But you really resolve a lot of Shaddoll effects most games, and really the main card here is Schism, because it gives us access to Winda on the opponent's turn to lock them out of the game, but also to Construct, which can dump our Shaddoll utility monsters and also clear other big monsters on our opponent's side of the field. Then we also have Apkalone, which can search any of these, as well as negate our opponent's monsters and other face-up cards. And so we really get a ton of utility out of the Shaddoll engine. And again, we have Apkalone to get access to that. We can get Apkalone in the graveyard with Nadir's Servant or Punishment, or any other ways, or Maximus, or any of the other ways Dogmatika engine can get extra deck monsters into the graveyard. And so there's a ton of synergy between these 2 archetypes. And it's really the Shaddolls that are one of the main ways that this deck generates advantage. And so with your Dogmatika engine, Ecclesia is a +1, Servant's a +1, Punishment's a +1, Maximus is a +2 if it resolves, and then with Schism we're getting a +1 every single turn by just summoning out these free fusion monsters and then getting more advantage when considering their effects. Hey guys, let's make a quick little bet, alright? So I'm going to draw a randomized test hand with this deck. I want you to take whatever deck you're playing right now, draw a random hand with that too. And if your deck can play through this board that we're going to make right here, right now, if your deck can't play through it, you gotta like this video and subscribe to the channel. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. So we are just gonna shuffle the deck, just gonna draw a random hand. And if your deck can't play through it, you gotta like and subscribe. Easy as that. Alright, so you guys can see shuffling the deck. Let's see what we draw. Sanctum, Punishment, Shaddoll, Servant, and Upstart. We'll even go ahead and use the Upstart right now. Get rid of all the randomization, and we draw into a beast. Alright, so what do we do with this hand? So first what we can do is play Servant. We can use Servant effect to search a copy of Ecclesia. And then we can send a copy of Apkalone to the graveyard. Now we can activate Apkalone's effect, search a copy of Schism, and then dump Beast to the graveyard. We're going to shuffle again before using Beast effect. What do we draw? Another Sanctum. That's fine. So now we have a hand of Ecclesia, Schism, 2 Sanctum, Punishment, and Aerial. We can summon our copy of Ecclesia, search a copy of either Fleur de Lis or Maximus for next turn, or a second Punishment. It doesn't really matter here. We already have so many resources. I think that probably the Fleur de Lis is good, so when the opponent summons an extra deck monster, which they probably aren't, but if somehow they do, we have that. Or actually, nah. The Maximus, yeah, as the follow-up play on the next turn. That's not a Maximus. So then we would pass turn to our opponent by setting the Schism, Sanctum, and the Punishment. So on the opponent's turn, they would have to play through a Winda because we have 2 Darks engraved, so we could go into Winda. They'd also have to potentially play through a Scythe and a Punishment, which could obviously destroy something and get way more from that, so we could dump Titanclad, special summon another Ecclesia, search something else, or send an Omega to start recycling resources. So much defense comes from this board. I'm pretty sure we just win against any type of deck in this format, and so it looks to me like you're probably going to have to subscribe to the channel and like the video, so I'll give you a second to go ahead and do that. Alright, cool, let's go ahead and get back into the profile. We are going to be doing more test hands after getting through the main deck though. Next we have just a small artifact engine consisting of 3 copies of Artifact Scythe, and then 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum and 1 copy of Scythe. 3 copies of Scythe would be wild, but the interesting thing about this deck actually is that Scythe isn't a brick card in this deck, because it's very easy for us to trigger Scythe on our opponent's turn as well because of the Shaddoll Engine. And so we can use we can send Dragon to the graveyard on the opponent's turn, use that to destroy a set Scythe that we set from our hand, and that can also trigger Scythe's effect. And so Sanctum obviously is great when you're going first to lock your opponent out of the game, but even Scythe 2 in this deck we can use to lock our opponents out of the game. And so I think if you open Scythe plus Punishment, for example, it's very easy to do. Like, your opponent summons a monster, you Punishment it, and then you send Apkalone to the graveyard, then you use Apkalone's effect, add Dragon to your hand, discard the Dragon, now Dragon can trigger to destroy your own Scythe. So that's an easy way to lock your opponent out of the game, clear one of their monsters, and really set yourself up for the next turn, especially if you have like a Servant or an Ecclesia in hand as well. Another thing you could do is use Shaddoll Schism, and so you could just use Schism, fuse for a Construct, Construct also dump Dragon, and then Dragon destroys Scythe, and you trigger the effect that way. And so these are just very easy ways that you can utilize Scythe on your opponent's turn even without Sanctum. But then even if you wanted to reuse Scythe or resolve multiple Sanctums, you can always use Omega's Graveyard effect to shuffle Scythe back into the deck and then utilize it again. And so as you guys can see, once again, there's so much synergy between all of these archetypes and engines, between the Shaddolls, the Dogmatika cards, as well as the artifacts. There's so much synergy, and it really allows this deck to function flawlessly. And now finally we have the Numeron Engine, and for that we have 3 copies of Network, 3 copies of Wall, 1 copy of Terraforming, and then a copy of Numeron Calling. And so this is another very consistent way to lock our opponents out of the game and not allow them to play, because we have 3 copies of Network, 3 walls to search Network, and then a Terraforming to search Network. And so it's very easy to get to, and then again there's synergy with the Shaddoll Engine, because one of the very few outs to Zexal is Impermanence, Infinite Impermanence. But we can actually use Shaddoll Schism to play around Imperm, because Imperm targets. And so the way it'll usually work is you're going to have your S0 on the board, you activate S0's effect, your opponent might try to chain Imperm, but what you can do is chain Schism, and then you can fuse the S0 Zexal away with a Shaddoll monster into a construct, and then now that your Zexal is no longer on the field, it can just resolve in the graveyard, no longer being negated, and your opponent's not going to be able to play. You have a construct which can dump something else, and then you just gain a ton of advantage and momentum on that play. Another really cool thing I like is when your opponent tries to do something similar with Forbidden Droplets, and usually people aren't discarding traps for that, so they're going to be losing 2 cards. Again, you just change Schism, fuse it into a construct, Zexal resolves, construct dump beast, and then you draw a card. And so they're losing multiple cards, you plus on that interaction, and then it's just such a huge tempo swing, and it's just, again, another bit of synergy that this deck has. Also, Numeron Wall is dark attribute, so that can be a dark monster for Winda as well. So again, synergy. Next we have hand traps, and for those I'm playing 3 copies of Imperm, 3 copies of Gamma, and then Driver, and then 3 copies of Ash Blossom. I think these 9 hand traps are just simply the best ones of the format. Ash is the most versatile, it's good against everything. Imperm allows you to dodge monster negation and other things that profit off of you using monsters such as Called by the Grave, Triple Tactical Talents, Gamma. Like, it dodges all that stuff. It gets around Guardian. It gets around so many different things, as well as being a great card to have as your 6th card or to use going second to help break boards. So serving multiple roles as well as being versatile makes it one of the best hand traps of the game. But then obviously Gamma, being able to both negate the monster and remove it from the board, is huge in this format. And so these 9 hand traps are without a doubt and very easily and by a wide margin the best hand traps in the game, which is why they are the ones that I'm playing in this deck. And now the final cards that we are playing in this deck, just 2 more cards, it's a 40 card list, is 1 copy of Upstart and then 1 copy of Trap Trick. And so both of these are deck building requirements. And so we all know what engine requirements are. They're cards that you play in order for your engine to function optimally. Like, you play Garnet so that your Brilliant Fusion engine works. Well, deck building requirements are cards that you play for your deck to work optimally. And so both Upstart and Trap Trick improve the consistency of this deck. They don't really do much else, but they make it more consistent. They both are functionally just other cards in this deck. And so I've structured this deck so that there are 10 cards that get you to your Dogmatika Engine. Again, your 3 Servants, 3 Ecclesias, Maximus, and 3 Punishments. And then you also have 10 cards to stop your opponent from playing. You have 3 Network, 3 Walls, Terraforming, and Sanctums. And again, the good thing about Trap Trick is that it can function in either of these 2 roles. You can use it to get the Punishment, which can get you to your Dogmatika Engine or your Shaddoll Engine, or it can function as a Sanctum to further lock your opponent out of the game and stop them from playing. And so this allows the deck to function at its most consistent level. And the cool thing about this is that you can effectively say that there are 11 copies of either of these roles, and then having 11 copies of a card in a 40 card deck going first gives you an over 80% chance of drawing one of these. And so you have an over 80% chance of drawing access to your Dogmatika Engine, as well as access to a way to stop your opponent from playing. And that makes this deck extremely consistent and very, very difficult for other decks to deal with. And if you do happen to have one of these already anyways, you can also just get access to Impermanence, which is very good for dealing with random monster effects. And so Trap Trick gives you a ton of utility, and again, makes this deck far more consistent than it would have otherwise been. So I definitely like it in this deck a lot. Moving on to the extra deck, first we have 1 copy of Zexal, and then also 1 copy of Megaclops. I like these 2 I like this ratio over just 2 copies of Zexal or more of either one of them, because I feel that you really only need 1 in the game. But if you do need 2 copies of them, so like if you need S0 again, like you summon S0, your opponent somehow clears it, you need another one, you can always go into Megaclops and then just revive S0. So Megaclops is effectively the 2nd copy of S0, while also being another option that you could play instead in certain matchups to where Megaclops might be better, such as Invoked, for example. I think Invoked has a lot tougher of a time dealing with Megaclops than they do dealing with an S0. And so it kind of serves multiple purposes here, but I definitely like this ratio a lot. Another interesting thing about having Megaclops in the extra deck is that it gives you a monster with 4,000 attack that you can send to the graveyard with Punishment to deal with your opponent's big monsters. And so that's actually a really cool interaction. Of course, you don't plus off sending it to the graveyard, but it's still really cool to have that your punishments will be able to deal with bigger things. Whereas in a lot of other decks, you might not have a way to deal with like a 3,500 attack monster that your opponent has. And so Megaclops is great for that as well. And now for the other Numeron cards we play, we're playing 2 copies of Gate 1, 2 copies of Gate 2, 1 copy of Gate 3, and then 1 copy of Gate 4. So I'm playing only 6 gates, and the reason for that is so that we do have the ability to summon each of our extra deck monsters if we need to. And so even though we're only playing 1 copy of Numeron Calling, we always have the ability to use Cyframe Lord Omega's Graveyard effect to shuffle Calling back into the deck, and then use Network once again to summon out the 4 gates, and then go into the secondary monster that we're trying to go into, which will again often be Megaclops. And so I definitely like this lineup a lot. Now I am considering dropping gates 1 and 2 so that we're only playing 4 copies of them. That way we still have access to going second, the ability to summon all 4 and just push for game. So I still want to always have that ability, but at the same time I do find it rare that we are actually summoning 2 monsters from the extra deck. It's not very often that the games last long enough for that to happen, and so because of that I am heavily considering dropping 1 copy of each of these and then only playing 4 gates. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. You could also play maybe a second copy of Network. That way it's easier to at least get into. You could play a second copy of Network and then keep all of these, just so you have like a larger Numeron engine and you're going to be able to use it multiple times. But I just found it rare that that came up. Like I felt that the first S0 or the first Megaclops is very often winning me the game, or the first, going second, negate your opponent's board with like a Dark Ruler, summon out all 4, push for game, and if you don't have game, maybe you end on a Megaclops to where your opponent's at like 1,000 life points and has to deal with this. That's usually game. And so I found that usually I don't need a second. I don't need to use Network twice, but you could definitely have the option to. But yeah, probably gonna cut these. Next, for the Dogmatika cards, we have 2 copies of Ash Dragon and 2 copies of Intis. I didn't want to play cards like Agnister Pegasus or the Fossil card because I felt that both of them are they have too many stipulations. I feel like Intis is the best one, and so I just wanted to play 2 copies of that over those. And then also, I didn't think that they're really worth playing, especially the Pegasus one, because it's a trigger effect, and your opponent can just play around that, so it's just too slow. I feel that Intis is just easily better than both of them. And then 2 copies of Ash Dragon because again, this is a Dogmatika deck, and so you need to have access to your engine, and this is one of the best ways to continuously generate advantage and access to your engine. So 2 copies of Ash Dragon is necessary. And then finally, for the Shaddoll Engine, we are playing 1 copy of Winda, 1 copy of Construct, and then 2 copies of Apkalone. I definitely want to bump Construct up to 2, but I'm not quite sure what to take out yet. I'm definitely taking out those 2 Numeron gates, but I'm not sure what else to take out for maybe the second copy of Construct. But these are a huge part of the deck, and I probably send Apkalone to the graveyard more than any other card in the extra deck because of the advantage it gives you. And once again, it just makes your servants and your punishments so much better. Like, it literally turns Nadir's servant into Engage if you have a beast. Wait, no, even if you don't have beast, it literally turns it into Engage, because what you can do is just activate servant. Servant will search like Ecclesia and then dump Apkalone. Apkalone will search and dump a beast, and then that gives you a draw. So it literally turns this into Shaddoll Engage. I mean, Sky Striker Engage. I mean, it's pretty much Shaddoll Engage. Shaddoll Dogmatika Engage. It's just such an incredible card, and so I really do like Apkalone at 2. You use the graveyard effect a lot. You also can use the on-field effect as well to negate things. Another common scenario is like your opponent plays Chainlink 1 Ecclesia in hand. You do Chainlink 2 Shaddoll Schism, summon out your Apkalone, and then you can use Apkalone to negate their Ecclesia so that they don't get a search. And then, so you're getting value out of the on-field effect, but then once it goes from field to grave, you get the graveyard effect and get even more value. So it's just like a steamroll on your opponents being able to summon these Shaddoll monsters. Absolutely incredible monsters. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and get into these test hands, because I know that just looking at a deck profile and just seeing this group of random archetypes and cards doesn't really tell you how the deck plays, how it functions, and what you do when you're playing this deck. And so I'm hoping that in this little test hand portion of the video, I can give a little bit more insight into how to actually play this deck and how good and powerful it really is. So let's go ahead and get started. So going to move the extra deck out the way for now and shuffle the deck and draw a hand. Let's go ahead and get into it. So for this first hand, we have Upstart, Fleur de Lis, Schism, and Imperm. And so let's go ahead and see what the Upstart gets us, because otherwise this hand is not that good. So maybe I didn't shuffle as well as I would have liked. But Ecclesia. So this does actually make the hand very playable. And so what we would do here is normal summon the copy of Ecclesia, use that to get access to a punishment. And then from here, we would just have to set punishment and Imperm onto the board. And so punishment, however, in this deck, once again becomes so powerful because of its ability to send Shaddoll cards as well from the extra deck to the graveyard. And so you really get a lot of utility out of your extra deck and out of your punishments and what you're going to be able to send. And so with this, we could send Apkalone, which could dump any other Shaddoll monster to the graveyard effectively. So we could destroy a monster and then draw a card. Or we could dump Ariel and then banish cards from the opponent's graveyard, or Dragon to destroy a back row too. Or we could send Titanclad to get more access to our Dogmatika Engine, Antis to destroy multiple cards in the opponent's field, or even Omega if we wanted to set up a recycle play. And so we really get a ton of value out of this punishment. I think personally, probably right now, the best thing to do would be to set up a Shaddoll play. I would probably dump Apkalone and then Beast. That way we get the extra draw, and then also set up the Schism in the future to maybe go for a window or something. So that's what I would personally do. So let's say on the opponent's turn, we activate a punishment, and with punishment, we would send Apkalone to the grave to destroy one of our opponent's monsters. Apkalone would then trigger, allowing us to add a copy of, let's see where it is, Beast. Then we can discard the Beast. Now Beast triggers, allowing us to draw a card. And then, I mean, who knows what the opponent does with his board, but then we'd be able to draw another card for a turn, which is a Wall. And so Wall at this point, there's sometimes going to be a conflict between whether or not you have stuff in your field and whether or not you're going to be able to use your Numerons. And that's one, I'd say, deck building contradiction that we do have in this deck. These are always better to have turn one when you're first starting rather than drawing in the mid to late game. That's one downside of these. And so if the opponent was able to clear Ecclesia, then this would be fine. We could have like also negated a monster. We'd have an open board and this would be good. But if not, then we would not be able to use it. And so if that were the case, we would just have to set Schism and then write like Schism plus probably Winda or Construct. And then for next turn, we would draw another Imperm. After that, we have a Scythe. So that's why it's kind of important to kind of keep access to your Dogmatika Engine too, which is why you have to consider with that first punishment, potentially dumping Titanclad to get another Ecclesia to then continue getting your Dogmatika Engine going, because that's the engine that really allows everything else to play. Now we could survive off of the Shaddolls for a while once again, like we could summon Winda, and then once we're done with Winda, we could fuse Winda and Ecclesia or something else into a construct, and then we could use construct and something else to go into an Apkalone. Like we can keep summoning Shaddoll monsters with Schism. We still get value here, but the Dogmatika Engine is just better at generating value. And now another thing that I would say is by summoning Winda, we'd have an extra deck monster, and so that does turn on the Fleur de Lis as well, which could also let us push for more damage. So if we had Winda, Ecclesia, Fleur de Lis, that would be a lot of damage. And of course the Winda won't be able to attack directly, but we still get a lot of damage out of these two. This is still 5,000, and so yeah, that's a lot. But let's go ahead and look at another hand. Let's do a final cut, and then we draw Calling, Imperm, Gamma, Maximus, and Network. This hand is not good. So we'd have to activate Network since there's no Calling in deck. We just have to activate Calling from hand, summon S0. Yeah, oof, that kind of sucks. So we would just summon the same 3, overlay for a Zexal, set Imperm pass. And at least this would buy us a little bit of time. This would buy us a turn. And then on the opponent's turn, we would draw into a copy of, wow, so Nadir's Servant. So here we're able to actually play. And so the opponent might, let's say, set some back row or set a monster or something. We could activate the Servant, and we can use that to search a copy of Ecclesia. And then we can also dump an Antis, which can deal with whatever they set on the board or something else on their side of the field that we might just want to deal with, not have to play into. Now from here we can special summon our, or we might as well normal summon it really. So we can normal summon the Ecclesia, activate the effect, and here searching Fleur de Lis would be good because we already have an extra deck monster. We have our Ecclesia. So Fleur de Lis is fine, but punishment at least will get us to our engine. So from here we could go ahead and summon Maximus by banishing the copy of Intis, or we could banish whatever we detached from the Zexal. Just realized that all of this is off screen, but you know, hopefully you guys could hear what I was doing. And so from here we could activate Maximus's effect, use Maximus to dump Apkalone and Titanclad. So then dumping Titanclad and Apkalone, we can use Apkalone's effect to... We have a couple of options here. So we have this Gamma in our hand, which is dead, so we could get Schism to set up a window play on the opponent's turn, or we could just get Beast and get the free draw. Schism's probably better though, just so that we have more access to disruption. So search the Schism, discard the dead copy of Gamma, so we could set both of these, in phase search Fleur de Lis. And so as you guys can see, we didn't open up very well at all, but if that S0 could just buy us one turn, top decking that Nadir Servant really changes the entire board. I mean, we would be able to summon the Maximus anyways, but having that copy of Nadir Servant to get Ecclesia was huge, because it turns into, on their turn 2, they have to still deal with the S0, plus deal with Fleur de Lis, plus deal with potentially Winda, plus punishment, plus Imperm. It's just too much. This is just too much for most decks to play through, and then on the following turn we could just go for game. And so let's go ahead and look at another hand actually. Let's see. So we have Ecclesia, Ash Blossom, Numeron Wall, and then the third Ash Blossom. And so one contradiction that this deck does have, another one, is that you actually cannot use Ecclesia and your Numeron Engine in the same turn, because for your Numerons you can't control monsters, and then for your Dogmatika cards you're locked out of the extra deck. So you really have to choose one or the other, and so in this hand it's clear that we would have to choose our Numeron Engine. So we'd have to use Numeron Wall's effect, discarding that to activate a copy of Network directly from our deck, which will be dumping a Calling to the graveyard. So then, in activating the Network's effect, we would be summoning our 3 Numeron Walls and a Zexal once again. So we have gate number 1, gate number 2, gate number 3, and Zexal. And we'd be able to back that up with an Ash Blossom. And so again, we'd be able to essentially stop our opponent from playing, and then on turn 2, we'd have the Ecclesia as a follow-up play. And then we would also draw into a Fleur de Lis, which isn't a terrible draw here. And so we could start by just normal summoning Ecclesia, and here we'd have the option between going for a Maximus or for going for punishment. Both of those have merits. I think punishment's probably better because it at least gives you the option of dumping a Titanclad on the opponent's turn. It's more disruption. So it's both engine and defense, whereas Maximus is, well, it's kind of both too, but it has to generate them. And so it's a little bit more risky in that you have to dump cards to the graveyard and then get the effect like that. So searching punishment's fine, but I will say Maximus is maybe more interesting. So let's go ahead and do that. Because this also dumps Titanclad, so you get a follow-up regardless, really. So on the opponent's turn, we would have detached for this. Almost forgot to do that. And so that's something that we could banish from the graveyard in order to summon our Maximus. Then we could use Maximus once again. We could dump Apkalone and Titanclad. Apkalone's effect will trigger. We could search a copy of Schism. And then we could discard probably one of these extra Ash Blossoms. And let's say we used one of the opponent's turn to discard, 2 of them just to be kind of fair here. And so we'd be ending with S0, potential access to window or construct. We have Ecclesia, Maximus. Maximus could be in defense, just depends on whether or not you want to push for damage or not. And then in the end phase, we would search an Ecclesia as a follow-up with a Titanclad. So we'd be ending with a ton of defense, once again through the S0, the Schism, the Ash, the Fleur de Lis, and then we also have the follow-up in the Ecclesia. And so this would be, again, a board that the opponent would have a lot of difficulty dealing with. It would just all depend on the opponent being able to, or it would depend on the S0, I should say, being able to stop the opponent for a turn. And if that can buy us a turn, it really lets us capitalize on that free time and allows us to build momentum towards being able to end the game, because if the opponent can't play through this, what happens on the next turn is definitely game, because we can play Maximus, or let's see what we would draw first. So we draw a wall, whatever, but we can use Maximus again. We could dump Intis, clear one of their cards, Titanclad to set up some, or not Titanclad, but Omega to set up some recursion, and then really just push for game between the Fleur de Lis, the other Ecclesia. I mean, this right here is already like 8,000 because, let's see, so this is, with Fleur de Lis's effect, it's 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, so that's 6,000, and then this goes to 3,000, so we're at 9,000 right here. So it's definitely possible to push for game. Maximus dumping Intis, clear stuff on the opponent's side of the board. If they have, anything else, we could just attack over it with a Winda that we would have. So there's just a ton of ways to go for game here, really. And so again, it's about stopping your opponent, and then capitalizing on the turn that gives you with your Dogmatika engine. So let's maybe do 1 or 2 more hands. You know what, let's actually just make this the final hand, actually. So this will be the final test hand that we do for this video. If you guys would like to see more test hands, feel free to just let me know, and I can do a dedicated test hand video, or I can give it a little more time, go more in depth, because in this video I'm trying not to make it too long. I mean, it's going to be long, of course, but not, crazy long. So I'm trying to keep it a little bit shorter. So let me know if you guys would like to see more test hands with this deck. So in this hand we have Wall, Ecclesia. Alright, let's see. Let's organize this a little bit. So we have 2 copies of Dogmatika Ecclesia, 1 Sanctum, 1 Numeron Calling, and then 1 copy of Numeron Wall. And so once again, we're gonna have to, we don't have to, but it's, I think, ideal to go for your Numeron plays first while you still can. And so we'd activate our Wall, use that to set a copy of Network directly from the deck. Activate our Numeron Calling from hand since we drew it, because we are not good at the game right now. And then we are going to use that to summon a copy of S0 by overlaying the 3 gates that we are going to be summoning with Network. So then from here, we could just set our copy of Sanctum. And so the opponent's going to have to play through both Zexal and Sanctum. There is a very high chance that they're just going to be locked out of the extra deck and unable to play. You're going to want to play around things like Gamma and Imperm, but that's not going to be that difficult. You wait for your opponent to summon a monster, you activate your Zexal. If they do have an out for your Zexal, like let's say they have Droplets or Imperm or something like that. Not Imperm, they won't be able to chain, but let's say they have Droplets or something. Well, you still have Sanctum to back your plays up. And so I think the likely case, though, is that you are able to activate your Zexal. And so then what happens on your next turn, you don't activate Sanctum if you don't need to, you want to hold this, but on your next turn you draw into Scythe. Wow, that sucks. But regardless, what we can do is normal summon Ecclesia, activate the effect, search a copy of Maximus here. So because we have the Scythe, I think we definitely want to get access to our we definitely want to get access to our Shaddoll Engine. So I think Maximus is actually really good. And what I think we could do here is activate Apkalone to discard this, and then activate Omega to shuffle it back into the deck. So we could banish our gate, summon the Maximus, activate Maximus's effect, and then for that, once again, we're going to dump a copy of Omega and then Apkalone to the graveyard. Activate Apkalone's effect to add a copy of Shaddoll Schism. And then we're going to discard the copy of Scythe. Now we activate Omega's effect to shuffle itself back into the extra deck and the Scythe back into our main deck. Now, it would have been nice to not have to do this, but it's interesting that this is a play that we can make in order to play around drawing a Scythe. The other option would have been to just search a punishment and then use punishment to dump Apkalone in the opponent's turn, search, add Dragon, discard it, then pop the Scythe. That's another option. but this works too. And so now we could just set the Schism, and then once again the opponent's gonna have to play through a Zexal, Sanctum, and now they have Schism to worry about as well. They don't even know the Sanctum's here, but they have a lot to worry about, and they probably are not gonna be able to play. We also have the follow-up in the Ecclesia. So then, assuming they're not able to play through all of this, and maybe we summon a Winda. So they like negate the Zexal, we drop a Winda. Oh, you can't see that high. Extra Monster Zone Winda. Just put it here. Or I can move these down some, I guess. Yeah. So the next turn we would draw into a Gamma, that's dead. But we'd be able to, and detach one from here. We'd be able to normal summon the Ecclesia, search a copy of Fleur de Lis. Even under Winda, special summon Fleur de Lis, and this is going to be game. If the opponent has any other monsters or cards in the way, Winda can attack over a monster. Maximus can dump Intis and destroy a monster or a card or something else. And so we really get a ton of ways to deal with the opponent's board. So again, Winda can attack over a monster. Maybe we put Zexal on attack to also attack. Maximus can dump like Intis and second copy of Apkalone. That could destroy 2 back row as well, but with Apkalone we could search the dragon and then discard it to destroy a back row. Intis could destroy a monster. But yeah, we can just clear the board, and then our 4 Dogmatika monsters is game, because again with Fleur de Lis's effect, this is 2000, Ecclesia is 2000, the other one's 2000, and then Fleur de Lis itself is at 3000, so that is 9000 damage. So once again, able to go for game, and so that's what this deck pretty much does. You slow your opponent down for a turn or two, and then you capitalize with your Dogmatika engine, and if you can set up multiple Dogmatika monsters in a Fleur de Lis, you can probably go for game. And so I hope that sheds some light on how this deck plays and gives a little bit of insight into how you can utilize these 3 engines together. But let's move on to the side deck before wrapping up this video though. But alright guys, thank you so much for watching this Shaddoll Artifact Numeron Dogmatika deck profile. I hope you guys have enjoyed it and got something fun out of it. If you guys would like to just try the deck out and you just want to see the deck list, I will be posting a picture of the deck on both Instagram and on Facebook. I'm going to try to start posting more on these social medias more often just to interact with you guys a little bit more. I think you guys might enjoy that. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, tips, tricks, anything, let me know in the comment section down below. I do read all of the comments and try to respond to as many as I can. And as always, if you made it this far into the video, I really do appreciate it. Take a moment to just like the video and subscribe. I really would love that as well. But as always guys, hope you guys have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.